Okay, so hopefully I'm streaming again and everything looks awesome. I just thought I'd do a quick stream just because you can actually see I'm trying to improve my production quality. So this is more of a test more than anything. So you don't have to really be here. But I've just been revisiting a book which I thought I'd share, and it's actually a really interesting thing if you have an interest in American conspiracy theory and the origins of all of the conspiracy theories which we know of today, including more recent ones like QAnon and the Deep State. They actually have their origins with they originated with this one guy whose name I've written here, William Milton William Cooper, and he wrote a book. This one, it's called "Behold a Pale Horse," and this is pre-internet, so he never really touched popular culture. So the chances are you might not have heard of him, although he's almost like one of the most influential people that in American culture probably, who actually isn't that famous. So that's what makes him quite a fascinating figure. And he sort of popularized conspiracy theories in a way which you can see people like Alex Jones and David Icke have since capitalized on and turned into more of a business. But he basically was a so yeah, I'll just bring up the main view, and I might have a picture of William Cooper pointing at aliens. So basically, William Cooper, he was a naval. He worked as an administrative assistant in the Navy, which gave him a kind of a. He sort of used it to imply that he had some kind of insider knowledge and had come across top secret materials. And he had a encounter with, and he had a story of having an encounter with a UFO while he was working on a submarine, and so he often talks about that. He toured America, giving these the United States, giving talks about UFOs. So what he was doing was he was marrying ideas about all the extraterrestrial ufology with conspiracy theories about JFK and the secret government and the Illuminati and whatnot, and it created sort of quite a powerful concept. And while most of America wasn't paying attention, the guy who created the X-Files did. And so when you look at the X-Files, that was almost the first thing which he influenced, was directly this whole idea of the UFOs and cover-ups. More than the Roswell type thing. This was that whole sort of nefarious federal authority type story. This was William Milton Cooper, and he and it kind of, while he alienated people, and both the people who were attracted to this were, either antagonistic to, or had antagonism towards the federal government, as well as people who were ufologists. And he obviously alienated people on both sides, but he created this interesting cultural paradigm. And so he was monitored by the FBI. He got the guy who bombed the Oklahoma federal building, the terrorist Timothy McVeigh, made a pilgrimage to visit William Milton Cooper at his home, in his town, and because he was the one who he created a video about Waco. The Waco, he sort of looked at that as being, if you think about the 1990s as that era where the federal government was seen to be making all these encroachments onto people's liberties in the form of Waco and and that was inspired McVeigh. And McVeigh was hearing this guy, Cooper, who had a shortwave radio show. Well, shortwave radio isn't something which a lot of people listen to, but it's a very sort of cult type thing. So he had this lot of sort of cult people following him. So quite interesting. And so this book is called Behold a Pale Horse, and it's like basically the what would you call it? It's the almost like the Bible. It's like a seminal. It's the work where everything begins. And I mean, just look at this cover. I'm just trying to find. I'm sure I have the cover on my. Here we go. Whoops. So it's the pale horse refers to a chapter in the Book of Revelation, and and someone who talks of this. There's a I think his name's Burkun, that the sort of one of the academics who writes about conspiracy theories described this book as it's like a scrapbook of a maniac, of a loosely bound mind. And you can sort of this is the bit where I show you how fancy I'm getting with my production now. What kind of live stream is doing has a second camera, huh? Look at that. Way. So he has this sort of every single page has top secret on it, which gives it this sort of makes you feel that like, oh, this is I'm accessing something really I shouldn't be knowing, even though all the documents in this book are all all publicly available. That nothing there he had any particular privileged access to. And he has this amazing fold out at the back. Apparently later versions of this book don't have this, but this one has it's this fold out which has all the names of the people involved with the Council for Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission, and you look like right from Amtrak to IBM, and it's this grand conspiracy. It's like this. It's almost like this. When you're that meme with the guy with all the things on the wall, and he's quite there is some meat in there, by the way, because essentially what all of this is this is basically the American elite. This is if you're in Britain, it's people who all go to the same school together always end up running the country, and you wonder why that is. And you don't have to. You can have a beautiful garden without imagining theories, like the fact that all of these people are connected, like all of these people in American business, culture, and foreign policy, the fact that they all have some relation to each other it's a conspiracy of sorts, in the sense that it's a club, but you don't have to, and I guess that's where conspiracy theories come from, because you can sort of start impugning all sorts of nefarious secret stuff on such a group. He does. So he has this chapter which is basically really he basically reprints the protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is obviously deeply anti-Semitic. And he does this really strange thing where, here we go, he does a little disclaimer at the beginning. I'm just finding the chapter now, and he says right at the beginning of it. Wow. So he actually has it right here in the book, Protocols of the Wise Men of Zion. And he writes, author's note, this is an exact reprint of the original text, which we know is a forgery. And this has been written intentionally to deceive people. For clear understanding, the word Zion should be Sion. Any reference to Jews should be replaced with the word Illuminati. and the word goyim should be replaced with the word cattle. And it's like, well, that's nice. You've disavowed anti-Semitism, but it's not very convincing. Like, okay, it's still, all the militias are still going to read this and still read that as the Jews, right? And he just writes a lot about the WHO, the Trilateral Commission, and it's all very it's difficult to follow. But his grand theory, I guess, is that it's is this thing called, he calls it the Hegelian dialectic, and that's that the powers that be see a particular outcome, and then they put all of these inputs in to achieve it. They've almost like they've programmed how society should run, and so therefore their conspiracies run along this program, So what he's doing is he's able to sort of see what they're doing, because once you have untwined some of that, you're able to start understanding how this group of ne'er-doers work, and so he obviously got, so think about what makes him interesting. Another thing which makes him interesting as an author is that, so this is all pre-internet. This book became the most read book in the American prison system. And so this man, William Milton William Cooper, is the link between white militia extremism and as well as black America. So it's an interesting link. So what happens is that there's a really good book. If you're interested in reading more about this guy, you need to read a book, and it's by Mark Jacobson, the author, and it's called Pale Horse Riders. This one, and he does a really good faith biography of Cooper, and sort of like tries to figure out if he's anti-Semitic. He meets some of his associates, Cooper's associates, tries to really get to grips with his worldview, and he goes to Harlem and he talks to someone. He gives a really good money quote where he says, "In America, there's no one who's more paranoid than an incarcerated black man." And it's like, yeah, that makes sense, where you can sort of see how there is actually a lot in common when you think about conspiracy theories, who believes them. It isn't just white militias. It's a lot of people who have been disenfranchised or had or don't have much control in their lives or any agency in their lives. And there's a certain theory amongst academics, and it's called agency panic. It's where people who don't have any control in their lives have to try and make sense of it. And for a lot of people, the fact that it's the Illuminati controlling everything, it makes just as much sense as it does, corporations looking for their bottom line. Like, functionally, there's no difference, because if you don't, other than maybe your one vote every 4 years in America, in the United States, or every 2 years in the United States, there's not much else you can do to change anything. And so the reason, and so there was a time when hip hop music, so basically every major hip hop artist in the United States has done a song where they have name checked either William Cooper or this book. It's like, so one of my favorite hip hop songs is Gravel Pit by Wu-Tang Clan, and I just re-listened to it just earlier, and I can't play it on the stream because of the copyright and stuff, but yeah, they just drop Pale Horse, of course, just the word Pale Horse, or William Cooper was right, and it's quite funny that, like, this guy who's the most sort of There's another picture. I've got another picture of him with a dog. People always look nicer when they've got a dog for them, eh? Here, and it's quite funny that this guy has sort of became the most name-checked person in hip hop for a while. And there was a certain Illuminati. There was this Illuminati phase of hip hop where every hip hop artist was rapping about the Illuminati, and Cooper was the one they name checked. And so the reason I got interested in reading this was because I'm doing this video about AIDS denial, and in his book in Behold a Pale Horse, he is talking about how the HIV epidemic was created as a way of depopulating the black and homosexual population, and this was done via smuggling HIV through vaccinations. And this is obviously very dangerous on many levels because it's disinformation. The idea that HIV was a bioweapon is ironically a conspiracy by Russia of disinformation, and that's a whole sidebar. I mean, this is why it gets really fascinating, but also hard to really make a straight narrative documentary like video essay about. The origins of the HIV as a bioweapon conspiracy was actually the first large-scale Russian campaign in the West, fake news campaign in the West. So that has its own, in our current era, that has its own fascinating aspects to it. But it arrives in America via this guy, William Cooper, and he popularizes it amongst the people who are reading this book, who are the people in disenfranchised people as well as white militias, just the whole range of kind of groups who aren't necessarily mainstream thinkers. And then it gets really scary when it reaches South Africa. So in South Africa, there is the ANC becomes the government after apartheid ends. And if you think about, I mean, if you don't know much, I mean, South Africa is a country which has so much weird stuff attached with it because of this era, this apartheid era. Apartheid government was run from a secret society. It was run by this group. They're called I think it was called the Broederbond. You can look it up, and it's this is something which would make some, like, funnily enough, this guy and Alex Jones and all the subsequent people, they never talk about this. And this was an actual government run by a secret cabal, right? So they have this group, the secret society that was running. So when you have a society which is as closed as a police state like South Africa, conspiracy theories flourish because everything is a conspiracy. If you are an African, a black African living in South Africa, everything is a conspiracy against you, and that's acknowledged. It's not like it's a you have to theorize about it. It's written in the law, you know, and so. And unfortunately, what that does for the agency panic that I mentioned earlier is that it means that becomes more difficult for people to actually really sort of grasp reality. There's a certain unreality at play. And so when it comes to science, and you're in a situation where you're in a group of people where the institution of science is something which they do to you. It's not something which you participate in the knowledge. You know, you're not helping to establish knowledge, scientific knowledge. You're not a what would you call it? A knowledge generator. You're someone who sees this institution of a white racist institution, which it is, and so therefore there is an inbuilt distrust. Even though when you can see how the benefits of science, you still understand the institution of science to be something which wasn't created with you. The benefits don't come for you. It's just institutional racism, right? But on a very intense level. And so when apartheid falls, the system of apartheid falls, after Mandela, so Mandela is this figure that he, a transformative figure that he is, but he isn't looking at the minutiae of running the country. That's like other figures within the ANC. And Thabo Mbeki emerges as this as Mandela's successor. And when you read about Mbeki, the politics within the ANC, it is quite interesting because Mbeki wasn't Mandela's choice, wasn't even his first or second choice. And Mbeki imagines himself, he's almost like he sort of fashions himself more on sort of Tony Blair than, let's say, maybe the communists that had preceded him. And so but he also has all these ideas of sort of this sort of narcissism of Thabo Mbeki. And he sort of sets himself up as someone who decides better than the experts. And I found clips of his chief of staff saying how they would write speeches for him using information gained from the civil service. And Mbeki would redo the calculations in the car on the way to do this speech and would say something completely different. And it would be because he's decided, he's just taken it upon himself that the experts, he's put himself above the experts, which is actually a really dangerous, and obviously it becomes fatally dangerous when he starts denying that HIV causes AIDS. And part of this is because of his own failures. You can see this HIV coming into South Africa. This is while apartheid falls, HIV comes in, and it's not hard if you're in a country that's almost awash with conspiracies. Now, I'm not going to say there's a legitimacy in believing this, but there is a sort of almost a rational basis in suspecting that nothing is what it seems. Do you know? That isn't it a coincidence that you gain enfranchisement and control of your country, and at the same time HIV arrives, the World Health Organization is making you buy expensive antiretroviral drugs, and you're suddenly being hooked into this new system that you don't have any control over. So you can actually sort of begin to see that while not even going to give him any more credibility than that, because I believe Mbeki was a narcissist, but he had someone who was his this woman here. Her name's we've got to take off this. Yeah. Her name's called Manto Shabalala Msimung, and she was his Mbeki's health minister, and she had her and they had a very close relationship together. I'm going to have to buy this if I do my little essay, my large, long, sprawling essay. I'm going to have to buy this image from the stock, the Alamy. But her and Mbeki were both exiled from South Africa together during the struggle against apartheid, and they both were imprisoned together and eventually escaped South Africa together. So they had a very strong comradeship. And if you think about how this government in South Africa had to move from the ANC had to move from being a party of liberation to being a party of governance. Their relationship sort of showed the flaws and what would happen with the ANC subsequently, because the ANC is obviously, there's all these different factions, and the real corrupt ones won over in the end. But what this meant is she had a let's say I'll say this on the stream. She was apparently an alcoholic. She got cirrhosis of the liver and had to have a liver transplant. And because of her problems, he would give her cover because of this strong relationship. But in exchange, obviously, she would talk as he would. She would do everything that, she would do his bidding. So as a health minister, she was running rampant, doing all sorts of just stopping pregnant mothers from pregnant mothers with HIV would not receive the medication that would stop their babies getting it, because while Mbeki had withdrawn from this debate, he was allowing her to take all that flack for him, and because she was a wild sort of a person, there was nothing to her. So the reason this turns full circle is one day in South Africa, this is in the 2005, I believe, so roughly 15 years ago, the administrators in South African hospitals all received this package, and it was a photocopy of a chapter of Behold a Pale Horse. So Manto Shabalala Msimung was a fan of this. This was her reading. And where she read it, I don't know. If someone had given it to her, if she'd read it in exile, or but that section about WHO providing HIV through vaccinations, which is just clearly rubbish and actually not even scientifically feasible. You can't actually, maybe dirty syringes, but not actually you can't. From what I've been told, you can't actually spread HIV as a sort of in that such controlled way. So despite the impossibility of it, despite the fact that its origins were in Russia, in fact, it hit African countries before it hit America, that conspiracy theory. So that, and then the intention was to obviously sour developing countries against American foreign policy. So this might have actually been the end game of a Russian conspiracy theory, the Russian disinformation campaign, which started in 1980, took 25 years to mature, where into a place where the South African government was withholding HIV medication. So it's a fascinating timeline. So within that 25 years, there's a narrative, and I've got to try and turn this into a video essay, which along the lines of, like you say, Radem10, you watched Art of the Heel a couple of days ago. So I spent a lot of time on Art of the Heel. So it took me like a year to make that, and this is another one which has taken me so long, because every time you go down a side road, every time you just so many different side roads, and they're all really deeply fascinating. So you'd go from this guy William Cooper, and you'd start reading up about hip hop and the militia movement, and then you'll go into South Africa, and then you'll learn about where the HIV as a bioweapon conspiracy first began, and you find out this whole thing about this Russian campaign to discredit America, and then you sort of learn about how and that's fascinating. And then just recently there was a video. It was called it's a documentary that was released last year. It's a Swedish documentary called Cold Case Hammarskjöld, which is about a conspiracy theory that's in Sweden, and about a Swedish diplomat who got killed in Africa, and it was done by the South African government, I believe. And he's uncovered a lot of the stuff last year, and he finds this South African mercenary who starts repeating that, oh yeah, we infected black Africans with HIV, and that was part of our. And so this has been spread across social media in 2020 as smoking gun amongst South African Twitter predominantly. This guy, he's admitting to what we always knew, was that South Africa was HIV was introduced into South Africa via the World Health Organization or by vaccination, and actually all that was basically this might have been an imagined memory of this guy. There's no way you can verify it, but now it's almost in some sections of that country, it's just received knowledge that's how the origin of HIV, and so it's been really difficult in a country like South Africa. So for a time, South Africa became a playground of really hardcore 15 cranks, And I actually have to, even on live stream, even on the stream, I should probably couch my words, because there's one particular person who is very litigious, who went to South Africa, and he sells vitamins for a living. He makes vitamins. He's a German person, and he has a particular theory about how the pharmaceutical industry has copyrighted natural. He can do everything the pharmaceutical industry can do, except with natural ingredients. And so he gets a lot of and so he started this drug trial in South Africa, or this trial. I wouldn't call it drug because that implies pharmacy. Oh, I don't know if I'm going to even really say, because I'm going to mash my words up and get in trouble, because this guy does. I don't know. Like, so basically, this guy he did these trials in a township in a poor township in South Africa, and it had and people died, and it was just he was selling vitamins, and yeah, he wouldn't do that. Oh no, okay, no, I can't speculate. But basically, it's. But you found that whole country became awash with lots of herbal remedies, lots of all sorts of things, because people were getting infected with HIV. They didn't have access to the healthcare system. They didn't have. They don't know who to trust. You don't know who to trust. There's an inbuilt trust of authorities, maybe. And yeah, obviously, so all there's a lot of people selling not necessarily valid remedies. When I say not necessarily, it's just say wholly unsuitable remedies. And yeah, and then you look at, and then obviously there's this whole AIDS denial in America. So yeah, that's what I've been doing. But this guy, so William Cooper, if you have not heard of this guy, he is the person who all the major conspiracy theories that people talk about now, whether it's 9/11, he died. Funnily enough, he died in 2001. He was shot by police, which also, if you want to be a conspiracy theorist, being shot by a law enforcer is probably the way to die, because that's a way to go out where there's all these questions hanging over your death, right? And people still say, "Oh yeah, he was killed because he knew too much," but really, he died because he wasn't paying his tax, and it wasn't actually a federal government; it was local law enforcement who were they were concerned about his mental stability and stuff, and he was carrying firearms because obviously he was paranoid, so he was carrying firearms and whatnot. So it became almost a sort of an inevitable thing that he was going to be confronted by the police, and he ended up getting shot. And but he has this legacy. People like Alex Jones owe everything to this particular person, and people like and David Icke, and all those people who came and made millions of peddling conspiracy stuff. And interestingly, there was some, although they didn't really meet each other, Jones and Cooper, there was some bad blood. Cooper thought Jones, because Jones was just taking off just as Cooper was just before he died, and Cooper considered Jones to be it's interesting reading what Cooper thought about Jones, because Cooper's, if you look at this, now this is, although it's just it's nutty stuff about one world government, new world order, you know, all the FEMA concentration camps. He was the guy who originated that. And all these sorts of things which you know, you can find it right here in this thick ass book. And so so Alex Jones is much more, he just freestyles shit, he just makes shit up. So this guy considers himself a legitimate researcher who is proffering a particular insight and backs all of his claims up with top secret documents, even though it's just whatever. He still has a particular, you know, he's a man of letters. He would consider himself, and he would consider, and he considered Alex Jones to be a sort of just a loser. So it's quite funny that this guy was sort of Alex Jones's nemesis, a bit of rivalry going on there. And so if you could sort of count them down, a lot of things like that. His theory of the Kennedy assassination was that it was some kind of shellfish poison using some kind of special bullets. So he did all that whole FEMA, all that stuff. The FEMA concentration, the FEMA camps came from him. So did sort of that sort of UFO. He believes that the Illuminati was contacted with by aliens. He one world government, that was his baby. Bioweapons, anything, all the secret society stuff, and I sort of dip into this just to, and it's the way it's written. It's very loosely structured. It's more of a scrapbook than anything, but it's so thick that people, if you're stuck in a prison cell all day, you'd probably read this from beginning to end, and you'd be like, wow, you can use your confirmation bias that things make sense to you. You just, like, for any subject you can dip into and go, yeah, so that's how the banks are run. Fuck me. Just look up the section where he talks about, the Council for Foreign Relations and the Illuminati controlling the banking system, and you'll be like, you know what? The documents are right there. What, like, that's black and white. And then obviously you can then go to the Protocols of the Elders of Zion and get filled up with some of that awesome stuff. So recommend it if you're interested. If you're interested in conspiracy theories, this is where it all comes from. This is the modern basis of it. And if you're interested, but I do recommend reading it in conjunction with the Jacobson book, which is Pale Horse Rider, because he actually puts everything in context. He sort of goes into sort of the because if you don't remember the 80s and 90s, you kind of need to have this you need to understand how this came into being, and how there was a time when George Bush Senior was talking about having a new world order. So this sends alarm bells off to people like this who are like, oh my God, George Bush Senior is, and then you look and read the back of this and you see, wow, George Bush Senior, total Illuminati. And so fun reading. And if you go online and look it up, you'll find all sorts of people. You'll find this guy from Public Enemy, Professor Griff. I think he does readings of it on his channel, on his own YouTube channel. And if you're into hip hop, you'll find all the hip hop mentions. If you're a fan of the X-Files, you'll find it there. And it'll be basically X-Files, just basically a dramatization of this book. And yeah, so and it's never been out of print. I think it's the publishing company. It's called Light Technology Publishing, and it's got this, like, I have to show you their logo. It's a sort of new age kind of publisher, and they have a sort of a I get the feeling it's one of these sort of print-on-demand kind of outfits where if you order a book, they'll just print one out and send it to you. They won't, it's not like they're printing thousands of them, but cumulatively over decades, they've probably sold hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of this book. And so long after he's dead, this is going to be still published exactly as it is. I think there's even I always like to read the publisher's disclaimers, because it's I think this book might have one, might not. This might not be the one, but there's the publishers themselves. They've got I think even on their website maybe they've got a disclaimer about, like, we don't actually. I think that the publisher said in that Jacobson books was said that she didn't read the book, she just published it. And it's like, okay, that's good to know. You don't have any quality control, because it was clearly wasn't edited. It came straight off his typewriter. But they got a winner when they got the rights to it. They certainly It probably pays for all their other. You look at all their other books and their lineup. It's all just like real sort of how crystals can can beat cancer and stuff like that. So they're probably this is probably their most successful book on their lineup. So yeah, so you learn something new. Thanks for coming.